Today, we are here to honor the life and legacy of the one and only Johnny Gaudreau.
You're Locked On Flames, your daily podcast on the Calgary Flames. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of Locked On Flames. My name is Jess Belmosto, and today we will be just honoring the legacy of Johnny Gaudreau. Today we woke up to the tragic news of Johnny and Matthew Gaudreau's passing after a horrible collision with an alleged drunk driver, and just really want to take the time to extend our deepest sympathies, condolences, love to all of those impacted. And I thought that today would be a really good day to just talk about who Johnny was as a person and how cliche it is to say that he lit up every room that he went into. But when you hear the stories that people have been sharing, it might be a cliche that's true. And one of the first things I thought of this morning was the story that I had heard of his antics after his first professional, NHL game. Him and some buddies were going out, and he had his check, a very big check, and he was ready to spend some money. And he walked into a bar and tried to deposit that said check into an ATM. And Kevin Hayes had to be the bearer of bad news and say, hey, so that's really not how that works. Give me a few minutes and we will take care of that. That is just a story that is so ingrained in my brain from however long ago I heard it. And I feel like it sums up Johnny, because you're not laughing at him. You're laughing at the innocence, the naivety, if that's the word, of who he was as a person. And I feel like, you might be able to go to an ATM and deposit your summer job check when you're 16, but definitely not an NHL salary check. And if there's one thing that we have all learned to love about Johnny, it is his love, admiration, and respect for his family and the people he considers family. He would do anything for them. And Matthew Gaudreau, who was involved in, or passed away as well, basically had the decision to choose what college they went to. And he picked Boston College because he knew that's where Johnny wanted to go and where he liked. And that's what they did. And they all looked out for each other. Matthew was more protective of Johnny. There's an article that I believe Jane Gaudreau, their mother, wrote a few years back about how Johnny was left off of a sign-up sheet, like a class roster for computer lab. If you are not old enough to remember, there used to be computer labs in schools, and you would have to be signed up to go to them, or you would have an elective period to go to computer science class. And Johnny was left off the roster, but he never said anything to anyone at school because he didn't want to upset anyone. And he was just there to learn. And Matthew was dropped off one morning and said to the secretary, why isn't my brother on a computer roster? Why did you leave him off? And I have to hear him talk about it every night. Can we fix this? Like, that is older sibling behavior. So, like, you would expect that to come from Johnny, but it was coming from the younger sibling. And Jane wrote that, that's when she realized Matthew was the protector. And I just, I'm assuming the situation got rectified and Johnny got to go to computer lab, but it shows how fundamentally rooted their relationship is, and how there is this deep love and care for one another. And it's devastating to think that they both passed away together. And families are destroyed because of it. There's really no easy way to put that. And it just keeps taking me back to these stories that you hear about Johnny, that you have heard for years and years and years on end. And Johnny Ham and Cheese, like, this is like one of the first stories I remember hearing about Johnny. And it is so kind and caring, and it shows again how much he cares about quality time and how important it was to be around people that he loved. His friends used to always go to a sushi restaurant, and he hated sushi. Hated it, hated it, hated it. So he would go to Subway and get a ham and cheese sandwich and go to the sushi restaurant with his friends to eat it. Like, that is not something as simple as, oh yeah, like, I'll, grab Subway and just meet you back at your dorm room. No. He brought that Subway sub, that ham and cheese sandwich to that sushi restaurant. And that is just something that it's so funny. It feels so Johnny. It feels so on brand for him. And just how deeply he cares about people and being around good people. But we're going to take a quick break here and come back with some more stories, because while his on-ice performance was stellar and something to idolize, his legacy off the ice is also something to discuss. I truly do hope that everyone is doing as well as they can be. I know everyone kind of handles these things differently, and especially something as unexpected as losing your favorite hockey player. Not necessarily an easy thing to process. And I think that's why it's so important to talk about the good times, right? And the cliche of they lit up every room they went into has been beaten into the ground by every true crime show, every Dateline episode, anyone that you have heard memorialized. But it is very, very true for Johnny. Everyone that has met him, that has shared stories today, talked about how captivating his presence was, and how you just knew that he was there. Something that came up in discussion a lot today was obviously the Hayes wedding, the Kevin Hayes wedding a few years ago, and how basically it was just a bunch of NHLers partying it up in a banquet hall, right? And the viral video of Johnny sitting on Brady Tkachuk's shoulders, dancing and singing and just having so much fun. It's one of those moments that, like, you look at, like, in this very second and think, I'm so glad that someone thought to record this, because Noah and Johnny Jr. will be able to look at that and be like, that's my dad. That's why I'm so outgoing. It makes so much sense why I'm a social butterfly. Like things like that. And you know, he's just a little guy. Like and just so fun, and just Rasmus Anderson posted a photo of them back at Andrew Mangiapane's wedding, clearly very under the influence, and just everyone was so happy because you got to see Johnny. Flames fans got to see Johnny with Rasmus Anderson, who, they were teammates with for years. And it's that nostalgia. And it goes to show how deeply cared about he was, still amongst Flames players. And speaking of the Flames, someone posted today, they were like, where's I don't have the picture, but where's all I can think about is the board where Johnny wrote like that Mother Teresa inspired him for National or International Women's Day, and the list is like his sisters and then his mom, Mother Teresa, and Meredith, who he was engaged to at the time. And it's just like, you have like your sisters that you grew up with, your mom that raised you, Mother Teresa sandwiched in between your fiance. It's just such like one of those things that, again, is like quintessential Johnny. And you just know that he so deeply meant all of those women. And that's great. A great group of gals. But I think one of the biggest things is remembering it's not about who you are on the ice. No one is going to talk about how you scored 16,000 assists. I don't know. I'm just making up numbers here. It doesn't come down to your numbers and how many goals you scored or how many Stanley Cups you won, how many playoff rounds you won. It is about who you were as a person. And Johnny, it is such an unfortunate loss for both brothers. Like, losing both of them is just unfathomable. It's unspeakable. And, so many Flames fans watched Johnny go from this kid that couldn't make weight to a father. Like, that is growth. And someone shared a story that I had never heard, which I think is hysterical. That at USHL camp, Jim Montgomery had to take Johnny to the doctors because he ate too much Nutella and he got sick. And Montgomery gave a quote and it was like, Gaudreau has horrible nutritional habits. He hates fruit. He hates vegetables. He wanted to bulk up, so he ate so much Nutella and then came to me and said he needed to go to the doctors. Again, it's one of those things where it's like so innocent and something you don't expect someone in like on the trajectory to be an NHL player. Like, you don't expect them to find themselves in that situation. Someone else shared a story about how he would tape pucks to him at weigh-ins and he still couldn't crack 150. And that's, again, little guy. And you eventually saw him start to bulk up and you're like, oh, you're still little, but not that little. And, in the tribute video the Flames posted today, you literally see a child grow into a man. And it is so unbelievably unfortunate that this life was cut short, along with his even younger brother. And it's not something that you can wrap your head around or try to make sense of. And I think that, unfortunately, Columbus has dealt with a situation like this before, not too long ago. And today, before really much time passed after the news had broke, fans started leaving flowers and jerseys and, memorabilia outside of Nationwide Arena in front of Johnny's banner. And Flames fans did the same thing at the Saddle Dome. The amount of purple Gatorade on the front steps of the Saddle Dome, like, if you just told that to, a random hockey fan, they'd be like, what does purple Gatorade have to do with anything? But it is so important to that era of Flames hockey. And it's so, like, to be sold out of purple Gatorade, like, James Johnson, who's been on the show a few times, but does a lot of other Flames writing stuff, talked about, like, he tweeted and was like, I went to 3 different stores and the purple Gatorade is sold out. Fans are leaving jerseys. There have already been calls to retire 13 for both organizations. I think 13 was going to be retired regardless at some point. But I did not project that to be in 2014. Nope, 2024. I thought it would be some time before we even started having these discussions. But there have been posts about wearing Gaudreau jerseys to the Flames home opener and just, like, really honoring him. And there was a piece from his Players Tribune article that went around as well that was like, I can't wait to bring my family back to Calgary and show them, this is where mom and dad, like, spent some summers at the Stampede, at Banff, here, and most importantly, the Saddle Dome. And that's never going to happen. And that is gut-wrenching. That is a punch to the gut when I read that. And a lot of people have shared the similar sentiments that we have today. And I do want to talk about that. And we'll be right back after this. It's really not about who you are as a performer. I think for many of us, it's not about how hard you worked at your job or how much overtime you put in, what kind of car you drove, or how big your house was. Were you there at your kids' recitals? Were you there at their baseball games? Did you show up for, your husband or wife's graduation? Did you show up when it mattered? And I'm not talking game 7 overtime, because at the end of the day, none of that matters. Who you are as a person is more important than who you are as an employee. And Johnny's hockey legacy, fantastic. Amazing career. And fans are so lucky that they got to watch him. But he will always be remembered for who he was as a person to those who knew him. And we got to see pieces of that. And he set a precedent, really, for undersized players. You don't really see too many small players. Like, the first one that comes to mind is really, like, Martin St. Louis. another small 5'8", 5'9" guy who was very skilled. And now you look and you have players like Dustin Wolf, you have players like Johnny Gaudreau, you have players like Cole Caulfield. Like there's like this whole like a gang of smaller undersized players that have been up and coming, and players like Adam Fantilli and Kent Johnston talked about how they looked up and idolized Gaudreau. And now he's just like, he's gone. But his legacy will live on forever. And he meant so much to all of his teammates. The first person I saw post was Oliver Shillington, talking about how this was basically, it felt like a bad dream. Even players that didn't play with Gaudreau shared his, his tribute. Players like Huberdeau and Martin Pospisil, Dylan Larkin posted something very nice, and they played, I believe they did play a little bit together. Zach Werenski, they were best friends. Sean Monahan was just on a podcast a few days ago talking about how excited he was to reunite with Johnny. Blake Coleman shared a picture of Johnny with Charlie Coleman, just a little kid hanging out in the Flames locker room. Matthew Tkachuk's post literally just shows them growing up together. From, those young days in the organization to their last days in the organization together. They used to kiss each other's gloves all the time. Like, it is something that you really strive to be. And I have to think a lot about Kevin Hayes and his brother Jimmy. The three of them were best friends. They all went to BC together. Jimmy was just obsessed with Johnny. And Kevin was like, there's no way this kid played. Like, he's any good at hockey. He's too small. That changed. Kevin lost his brother 2 years ago. 3 years ago? 3 years ago. Like 2 weeks ago. Marked the anniversary. And today, he lost his other best friend. And there's a saying that they kind of used when Jimmy passed, and it was, be like Jimmy. And I can't help but think that Johnny really put an emphasis on being a good person and being a genuinely kind human being, not only because it's the right thing to do, but it's what his best friend would have done as well. And it is just a horrible situation to think of too much about, because at the end of the day, 2 young men lost their lives last night. And it is so disheartening when you have to see grown men on Instagram sharing their condolences and their heartbreak and their grief for something that was so avoidable. They were supposed to be at a wedding today. Johnny and Matthew were supposed to be groomsmen in their sister's wedding. That's why they were in town. That didn't get to happen. It didn't get to happen. And I hope that we are able to celebrate Johnny's legacy for a very long time. I hope that the Flames organization does it for a year, for literally forever. And whether that be putting 13 up in the rafters or, a statue in the new arena. I don't know. We just all need to strive to be as kind and genuine as Johnny. And it is very difficult to do that when you're grieving, and there's no right or wrong way to grieve. That is one thing that I cannot stress enough. For some people, you know, okay, like a hockey player passed away, but for many of us, this is a player that got us back into hockey, that brought you back to the Saddle Dome, that got you excited. He is the main reason why I started covering this team back in 2020. I was so excited when I heard there was an opening, not only because the Flames have super cool jerseys, but because there was that Boston connection with Johnny Gaudreau, and I'm from Boston. So, you know, I have this signed puck right on my bookshelf here, and it has been part of the set background for years and will be part of that forever. Johnny is just someone that was so much bigger than hockey, even though his name was Johnny Hockey. He was John to his family and his friends. And all of this is just such a horrendous reminder that life is short. And we need to just do our best to make the most of it and make sure our actions don't impose on anyone else's time on this planet to the point where it could cut them short. I think, you know, the biggest thing would be to continue on Johnny's legacy of being generous, being kind, and being thoughtful, whether that's paying for the person behind you's coffee, you know, paying for someone else's breakfast, leaving a bigger tip than you normally would, or buying your loved ones some flowers, or, you know, dropping in to visit your grandparents, whatever the case may be. Remember, you know, this is a horrible reminder that life is short. And I just hope that we all can take the time to properly honor Johnny throughout the season and Matthew's hockey legacy as well. You know, the Gaudreaus, it wasn't just Johnny Gaudreau in Calgary. It was the entire Gaudreau family. And it is heartbreaking. Absolutely heartbreaking. But that'll do it today. I hope you all have, you know, try to have a good weekend. We'll be back next week with whatever might lie ahead. But I will see you all then. And thank you for tuning in. And my DMs are open. The comment section is open as well. And I'll see you later.